So you might be wondering, why is Lemonade stock dropping? After the earnings of Q3, had a huge jump in the stock price, going from about $11 a share all the way up to $17 plus per share. But then the last few days, it's fallen down all the way back down to 14 some dollars per share. So what is happening, especially why this little gap down to 14? Well, basically Lemonade filed a Form S3, and there's two reasons they may have filed this form. First one is to allow SoftBank, one of their main investors and backers of Lemonade, to sell some of its position. I think they own about 11% of the company. That sounds like they don't immediately plan to sell it. Or the second reason is raising capital for Lemonade at some point. Though it also sounds like they don't immediately plan to, especially if you read the press release, says they have no immediate plans to sell securities. They just felt it was prudent to include this optionality as a matter of standard corporate governance to respond to future financing and business opportunity. And in regards to SoftBank potentially selling their shares, it says the company has not been advised as of the date of this release that the stockholder has any specific plans to sell its shares, but still spooks the market for two main reasons, because people aren't sure, hey, is SoftBank going to sell a portion or all of their shares? And is Lemonade suddenly raising capital at this low valuation? So both these reasons, I think, causing some uncertainty in the stock price, and you see the share slide. And we got further confirmation on X from Lemonade CFO Tim Bixby. He said, "We've had a contractual obligation in our investor rights agreement for years that requires us to register the shares for large holders that invested in Lemonade's pre-IPO by December 31st of this year, 2023. This type of filing is quite common for recently public companies. Lemonade," and then he also said, "Lemonade has no current plan to issue shares as noted in the filing." So it seems very clear that Lemonade is not planning to raise capital. I mean, the CFO himself, they said that in the news release, and then he took the opportunity to go out of his way and respond on Twitter and tell us that clearly, plainly, they're not planning to sell any shares or issue shares at this time. Though I think it's a wise move. It's something I've talked about on the channel before. Hey, if the stock price rose, say Lemonade does a 4x, 5x in the next year or 2 years time, and maybe the valuation of the company is between that $4 to $6 billion range. Well, then you could see the company, maybe they do, maybe it's $5 billion, it's worth that, and they do a 20% dilution to raise an extra $1 billion of capital. That $1 billion, and Lemonade can grow much more aggressively. I think that would be a great scenario, and Lemonade is just taking the opportunity that they have this filing to open the door, and I believe it's for 3 years they would have that option. Of course, they could do another filing in 3 years' time if need be, but at least then the option's still open and on the table. So I think this second concern about raising capital for Lemonade is really not a concern whatsoever. Maybe they raise capital down the line. That could be a really good thing and actually a very bullish thing for Lemonade if the time came. But the first point about allowing SoftBank to sell some or all of its position, that's still likely concerning the market. I'm not a lawyer, so if somebody knows the legal details of these things better, please let us know in the comments down below. Love to hear that. But I was reading on X, WK asked, was there a filing in place for SoftBank to sell that just expired, in which case it would be more of an administrative setup or step? I would think that SoftBank would always want to be in a position to be able to sell and get a liquidity for all of their holdings and need it. So he's asking, hey, is this just sort of some administrative step they took and needed to take, or is this actually timing their planning and setting themselves up to sell? And Steel Bath Operator says, if one reads CFO Tim Bixby's response earlier today, that would be the correct conclusion. And Neil said, I didn't get that impression. The SoftBank always had the ability to sell their stake. Was that ability always there? And Steel Bath said, yes, I believe so, like a standing instruction that required renewal. In previous filing, Daniel Cheyenne, one SoftBank rep, formed an investment committee with the right to control this position. And that was also filed on December 31st, 2020. So I don't know if that's a 3-year term on that, and then that is expiring, and simply SoftBank is renewing that optionality. Not 100% clear to me, and again, I'm not a lawyer on these things, so I'd love to hear if somebody has more insight. Let us know down below in the comments. But on the other hand, it is clear that SoftBank is having some type of financial issues. They had a $6.2 billion quarterly loss as they were a major investor in WeWork, and other investments also go sour. People are posting some analysis around SoftBank and their liquidity issues with holding the Japanese yen and US dollars. So it doesn't seem entirely clear to me, at least, does SoftBank need this funds? Will they be selling their Lemonade shares or not? The volume on the November 9th and 10th was a little bit higher than our average. It was 3.25 million shares on the 9th and 2.74 million shares if you go back before earnings. Typical was more like maybe 1 million shares or so traded. So a little bit higher over the last few days. So maybe there's potential that SoftBank was already selling. We won't know that for sure until there's a filing from them if they did sell any. And the negative take on SoftBank, if they are selling, is that obviously it's going to put a downward pressure on the stock if they're selling, part of or all of their 11 million, 12 million shares that they own. But the more positive way to view that is to say, hey, we have a large shareholder that's selling their shares, and the reason they're selling shares is completely separate from the actual fundamentals of the company. So the stock could go down and potentially have downward pressure just because people are kind of getting a discount from the current price down to what SoftBank would have to sell, a large part of their position at, just as the market dynamics push the price down. But in a way, the reason they're selling, if they were selling, has nothing to do with the actual fundamentals of the company. So it's kind of like having a steal of a deal to buy more of a company that you have ownership in. It would be my interpretation of that, more bullish interpretation of that. So in the end, I'm still really pumped about Lemonade. I still think the future is super bright. I still think their Q3 was a massive smash success. And maybe the stock's going to trend lower because of SoftBank. Maybe they're not going to sell shares at all, and it was purely administrative. It's not really clear to me. I don't think it's totally clear to anyone, but that is at least why Lemonade has slipped in the last few days. Thanks for watching. Let me know what you think down below in the comments. Remember, it's in the bag.